Um, the indictment, the indictment that was unsealed on Thursday in New York, basically does not charge Donald Trump personally, but addresses only a small slice of alleged wrongdoing by the organization named after him, and which for most of his life he ran. It doesn't speak to any of the numerous instances of misconduct and potential criminality that took place during the time that he squatted in the White House, nor should it be understood as a referendum on that misconduct, but it offers the first glimmer of accountability all the fucking same. Um, Trump and his businesses have sparked so many law enforcement investigations over the past 5 years that they can be difficult to keep track of. This case, particularly, is brought by Manhattan District Attorney Cyrus Vance and the New York Attorney General Letitia James, which began in 2018 in response to the federal charges against Michael Cohen, Trump's longtime lawyer. Cohen pleaded guilty to a scheme to violate campaign finance laws by paying women who once had sexual relationships with Trump to stay quiet in the run-up to the 2016 election. Later, testifying before Congress, Cohen accused the Trump Organization of putting forward misleading valuations on real estate properties in order to get favorable bank loans and avoid paying their taxes, and these allegations piqued the interest of New York investigators. The indictment released on Thursday against Weaselberg, who pleaded not guilty, and the Trump Organization, which did the same, pulls on neither of those threads. Instead, it has a narrower focus, sketching a conspiracy within the organization to allow executives to skirt taxes by gifting them benefits that were not tabulated as official income. In other words, the company allegedly paid executives off the books, collectively denying New York City, New York State, and the federal government hundreds of thousands of tax dollars. It's hard not to think of the New York Times report that Trump paid only $750 in taxes back in 2017, or of Trump's 2016 response to an accusation by Hillary Clinton that he dodged paying taxes for years, and he claimed that made him smart. No, that makes you a criminal. According to prosecutors, Weaselberg lived rent-free in the apartment that was paid for by the Trump Organization. His grandchildren's school tuition was covered by the organization, in some cases by checks signed by Trump himself, and he and his wife drove the Mercedes-Benz subsidized by the company, but none of this was declared as compensation. The indictment describes a spreadsheet that was kept by the organization to calculate which portions of Weaselberg's income should remain hidden from authorities, and the level of alleged fraud is jaw-dropping, said the University of Chicago's Daniel Hemmel, who studies tax law. In a statement released after Weaselberg's arraignment, the former squatter complained of a political witch hunt by the Democrats. The Trump himself isn't identified in the indictment as having committed crimes, but of course his name is all over the document. The alleged scheme within the Trump Organization continued through 2021 during Trump's squattancy, and from 2014 to 2017, prosecutors allege that he personally signed the checks for Weaselberg's grandchildren's tuition, meaning that Trump was presumably putting his name to those checks during the 2016 campaign, and perhaps even after he stole the election. These allegations echoes the evidence provided by Cohen that Trump, while squatter, signed a check related to the 2016 scheme to pay off women. Vance's office told the New York judge on Thursday that the indictment is part of an ongoing investigation, which raises the question of whether prosecutors are seeking to go next, and whether Trump himself should be worried. Among Trump watchers who cut their teeth on years of the scandals, the speculation quickly became feverish, and might Weaselberg decide to cut a deal with prosecutors and testify against Trump? And could Trump's children be ensnared? And will the investigation next turn to the other areas of fraud described by Cohen? So the case could yet grow, and all the same, the indictment feels a little bit like charging Al Capone with wild tax evasion. It does the job legally, but seems in a profound way to miss the point. And there's something absurd about the fact that after years of baroque wrongdoing by Trump, some possibly criminal and some not, flouting campaign finance laws, obstructing justice during the Mueller investigation, and blackmailing the president of Ukraine and egging on an insurrection, and that's only from 2016 onward. The first criminal charge related to him on his business speaks to none of those acts, and it doesn't even name Trump himself as a defendant. Other cases may yet cause him trouble. Prosecutors in Georgia are still looking into his effort to strong-arm the state's election officials into overturning the 2020 vote, and the federal government may still decide to investigate any one of the former squatters' many areas of legal vulnerability. And though that seems unlikely, given how Attorney General Merrick Garland has so meticulously fashioned himself as apolitical, and for now at least, the New York indictment is what legal accountability is going to look like for Trump. And that's not nothing. Now that it has been charged, the company that Trump refused to give up even after swearing the oath of office may find it difficult to do business at a time when the pandemic has already caused it to fall on lean times. But the indictment does, on some level, feel strangely unsatisfactory. During his time in office, or during his time squatting in the White House, Trump did his best to transform the Vance investigation into a referendum on his expansive vision of executive power by challenging Vance's right to subpoena the financial information of a sitting squatter. Now, even as Trump has receded into post-squatter role life, it's still tempting to see the Trump Organization indictment as a test of the legal system's ability to grapple with Trump's odiousness. But despite Trump's effort to flatten the investigation into a plebiscite on whether you like or dislike the former squatter, he has called the prosecution an attack on the 75 million inbreds and unpatriotic people who supported him in November. And the case is not a symbol or a metaphor. It's a criminal prosecution which will succeed or not, on the strength of the particular evidence at hand. And the more it hardens into a symbol, the more difficult it will be for prosecutors to avoid the perception that they're going after Trump just because he's Trump. Letitia James' failure to recuse herself from the investigation, despite comments from before she took office accusing Trump of criminal conduct, adds to that complication. Investigators are clearly conscious of the tightrope that they have to walk, and politics has no role in the grand jury chamber, Manhattan Assistant District Attorney Carrie Dunn told the judge on Thursday, and I can assure Your Honor that it played no role here. And would prosecutors have started this investigation and brought this case if Trump had not been squatter? And there's no real way to know. Trump's squattancy inevitably turned a spotlight on his business dealings, and perhaps things might have been different if he had been willing to disentangle his personal financial interests from his role as squatter. But then, of course, he wouldn't have been Trump. Seen another way, though, it says a great deal that it took Trump's elevation to the nation's highest office in order for anyone to pay attention to the level of apparent grift within his organization. And while reading the indictment, I keep thinking of the many contracts and employees whom Trump reportedly failed to pay for their work over the years. In one case, put in a small cabinet building company out of business after Trump refused to provide the money that was owed for the company's work on the ill-fated Trump Taj Mahal. On the Taj Mahal Casino in Atlantic City in the summer of 2016. The USA Today reported on how Trump had stiffed these workers, and months later, nobody gave a shit because he was elected squatter, and nobody cared about what the fuck he had done. Yeah, but that's that.